Welcome back, everyone, to theCUBE's special presentation here in our Palo Alto studios. I'm John Furrier, host of theCUBE. We got a great presentation, 2 days of coverage. We're streaming out around theCUBE and NYSE Wired community. This is an open project where we're collaborating with the best people in the industry to share information with you around the movement of AI and how it's impacting business and business model transformation. We've had CEOs, we've had innovators, we've had CFOs on, really talking about the business model transformation, which is the biggest impact that AI is having. Productivity, you name it, it's affecting everything. Cybersecurity, you name it, business models, everything's happening. And of course, we're bringing that to you. We got John Griffin, founder and CEO, CUBE alumni with m3ter, was in New York City in our East Coast point of presence. We're here in Silicon Valley, and Scott Sahadi, who's the CEO and founder of harpin.ai, experienced operator, entrepreneur. Got two entrepreneurs cracking the code in AI. Good to see you. Thanks. Good to see you, John. And Scott, thanks for coming on theCUBE. Welcome.
Thanks for having us.
The CUBE alumni and the Wired Network.
Great to see you again, John.
So this event really has been an eye-opener for me because, Brian Bauman, who's heading up the capital markets at NYSE, initiated the Wired Network, which is a group of an ad hoc kind of a trust network, and where people are sharing, actively engaging. And what's coming out of this event with CFOs and AI and the AI leaders in Silicon Valley is that the business model transformation is the thing. And I'm old enough to remember the days of consumerization of IT back 20 years ago, and then the digital transformation, and then now with AI, it's clear business model transformation. So CFOs are leaning in, so we had the CFOs come in, and they're telling me that, look, they're involved in many conversations, pricing changes, business model, innovations, changing from subscription to usage, which you do, John, we talked about that in the past. But more importantly, they have the keys to the kingdom relative to how the business model architecture is. And financial strategy is flexing with the business model transformation on the business side, personnel, data, how that data is formed, do we put it on the balance sheet, all kinds of new stuff. The normal stuff, cybersecurity, that's all there, compliance, governance. But now new things are coming in. Do I hedge my GPU purchases? Do I buy the new GPU? How do I handle supply chain? All these, what about disruption? What about cost? So a huge amount of issues are now thrust at the CFO. John, we've talked about in the past, you deal directly with that. Scott, you're doing ventures with data where data plays a role in where the enablement's coming from. So the value add is cost optimization, efficiencies, cost savings, the CFOs love that, and revenue.
Yeah.
This is kind of where it's going on.
Yeah, totally. I mean, AI is creating a massive tailwind for this, and a lot of companies, as they adopt it, the first thing they do is they have to fix their product, they have to inject AI into that, and that's for the product teams to consider. But as you point out, in parallel, they've got a twin challenge of being able to monetize those changes effectively, and that's really where the CFO steps in working with the product teams to understand these new models. And typically what we see is that these models are making companies transform from seat-based pricing, which has been all the rage since probably around 2000, to adopt more usage or value-based pricing. And value is the particular new buzzword in the kind of world of AI. So in other words, have companies price based on the outcome it delivers rather than necessarily how many people are using it. And so this is a strain for a company because typically they do not have the monetization infrastructure in place. They may have a CRM, CPQ environment, they may have their accounting systems, but those systems are unable to deal with the new usage-based pricing models that they're implementing. And so that's where my company m3ter steps in to try and fix that.
I want to get into the m3ter, M3ter, not the 3 is the E, as we all know, the sysadmins all know what that means. Scott, you have a company, I want to get into your company too,
sure.
But you're both successful entrepreneurs that have track record, exited entrepreneurs. You're dealing with customers all the time, and they got to operate. So they're changing the engine out at 30,000 feet, as they say, and they have to kind of do this. They really can't screw it up because the pace of play is so fast, Scott, and this is the challenge. Data is driving everything.
Yep.
And so, we'll get to the usage pricing. That's a huge conversation, but data in and of itself is changing everything.
Interesting that you mentioned something about the balance sheet at the beginning of your segment. The folks we work with are starting to look at data as part of the balance sheet, as an asset on the balance sheet, which think about that for a second. It's not furniture, fixtures, property, plant, all that stuff that makes up that balance sheet. The goal that's sitting in these companies, which is what we really focused on upstream, is how do you best manage and monetize that data in a world of AI? And in there is where we see this business transformation. literally putting data on the balance sheet, I think is the direction that we're going.
Yeah, I mean, that's a CFO conversation. Well, quick sidebar on that. What are you seeing for CFOs and business leaders as it's a top down, take that hill, we need AI in all of our stuff, and then bottom up from the techies. Are they deer in the headlights? Are they leaning in? What is the vibe and what is the orientation of the customer who have to deal with this challenge?
Yeah, it's the folks we deal with, they're very experienced executives across the board, whether it's line of business, CFO, or IT. The good ones are kind of taking a crawl, walk, run strategy, out of wanting to learn, because this stuff is hard, even though everything's supposed to be super simple, adopting people, process, and technology to take advantage of AI. So we see a very methodical approach that is very much ROI and process driven. And I think that's where things like compliance come into play specifically for a CFO, because lots of promises being made out on what these capabilities can do for a business, but a real thoughtful plan. That's kind of where the CFO really needs to lean in a lot, because there is a lot of activity happening in these companies.
Let's get into harpin.ai, your company that you founded again. Yep. This is really the value proposition you guys state, maximizing your data, and that's everyone wants to do that.
Yep.
What are you guys doing? What's unique about it? Give a quick 1 minute, explain what you guys do, then we'll unpack it, because this is the core problem. What do I got for data? Is it valuable, and where do I apply it?
I think it's what I was saying, the tie-in was thinking about your data as an asset. And if you think about the quality of that data, no one actually thinks, I got to wake up today and improve the quality of that asset. In fact, that's what everybody should be doing. So we see across the board folks starting to shift to the accuracy of that information, the availability and the actionability of that data to power all the amazing use cases that they want to move to. So that's what we've really been focused on. It's a very heavy set of machine learning and automation and artificial intelligence that helps solve the messy bits upstream.
Mm-hmm. And what market are you guys targeting? What's the business model?
Business model is, great question.
Maximizing the data. Yeah.
Our business model is to try to solve these problems in a way with a business model that is acceptable to the business. We don't try to force feed a specific business model. I know that sounds crazy, but since everybody is in a phase of learning, we do a lot of trials. We convert those trials to actual paid customers because people want to see results first. So I think that's been our focus from a business model perspective. And what we're seeing is a ton of interest.
And you guys are a SaaS product?
We're a SaaS product, absolutely.
Identity focused? What's the kind of, take us through the product. How do people consuming it?
Initially focused in retail, e-commerce and retail. We did just win our first bank, which is kind of exciting. A little bit nerve-wracking, but awesome all the same.
Yeah, big budgets too.
Big budgets. I think the key is all of our early customers, we both have an appetite to want to learn how to apply this stuff together. So the partnership model, I think when you walk in and say you have it all figured out, whether you're the customer or the vendor or the partner, I think you get into trouble a little bit. So if we approach it all as everybody learning together, we tend to get the best results, and then we measure those results very frequently. So SaaS model combined with a pretty experienced team of data scientists.
It's interesting, we hear the same thing over and over. Yeah, we still want to evaluate good technology purchases. That's the purchasing side of consuming technology. But the CFO gets involved, asks kind of basic questions like, is it valuable to have centralized or siloed systems? And I mean, these are just basically, I call it just generic questions, because they have the keys to the kingdom relative to the money flow.
Yep.
And so what I like about what you're doing is that you say, hey, if you have silos, that's not good, right? It's number one.
Not good for compliance anyway.
Compliance and who's tracking what's being governed, want to make data freely available to match the latency of some of the software.
Yep.
So the nerds are like, well, I need low latency inside the CI/CD pipeline, kind of like security. Like, well, what? I can't get that data to you fast enough, therefore the AI is not good.
Right.
I mean, that's a basic concept in tech.
Yep.
Now the CFO goes, well, bottom line does that impact revenue? Well, yeah, one, the cost of servicing the data, and then that's not getting into the value proposition. Again, this is kind of in the weeds, but that's a core problem.
It is. The cost to serve, you just mentioned that. Great concept. Upstream, data quality drives a lower cost of service, whether that's in call center or marketing or operations, you name it. All of those AI models need high quality data. Yeah. So it's a complementary approach.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big believer, obviously we do this with theCUBE on our media side, is that high frequency insights is the equivalent impact of what in the high frequency trading market was in Wall Street. And I learned that as we learned about the NYSE community.
Good analogy.
Is that's where the value was, getting that speed advantage.
Yeah.
Whether it's a human or an app, that comes value. And I think that's going to change a lot of the kind of the thinking around what data does, how fast it's available, the quality and all that good stuff. Now, John, your venture, we had a video. If you're watching, go to the YouTube channel on theCUBE. There's a great interview where he goes into great detail on m3ter and the value proposition. But you guys are very disruptive and are on the right side of history, in my opinion, because you're facilitating in a high quality, reliable way the migration from subscription per seat, subscription, old models to new, where it's usage. I mean, I could see LLMs and small language models and these foundation models having all this like small little transactions on a power law, big to small, but they're metered. Like, that's your name of your companies. Like, you are driving a business model, that's how you get paid. Yeah. And so I think that's a lot of attention on that product.
That's exactly right. And I think, as companies kind of adopt AI into their own products, what they learn very quickly is their cost base changes quite a lot. And therefore, in order to kind of cater for that, they are better off adopting a usage or value-based pricing model themselves. And I guess one of our biggest observations while we were at AWS and our time there before we set up m3ter was that software companies are really good at focusing on their product and building great products, but often at the expense of spending their focus on their monetization infrastructure. And that wasn't a problem when everybody was on subscription, because seats are not that hard to process. But as soon as you actually have to start charging using these mechanisms, it exposes weaknesses. And m3ter's job was to address those and to kind of give companies the same kind of level and quality of monetization infrastructure as they have with their own product.
Dave Vellante always uses the term, he's an analyst, old school days. You can slice the salami any way you want. That's where we're going with usage, because you have transactions, the per seat is a little bit slower, and easy to manage because they happen, it's easy to model. But there's a lot of unpredictability, and everyone moves to services. And what AI is doing, if you get to the data with Harpin and what you guys are doing, is that the personalization and/or the granularity levels are getting thinner. But in the aggregate, they're massive. So, John, talk about the Amazon experience, because I think what you guys are doing comes directly out of Amazon. I call it client zero. People call it client zero. They do their own things first, and then then they go down. You're kind of doing that. You were client zero within AWS. You cracked the code on usage. How did you take that into the venture?
Well, yes. Prior to joining AWS, I had another company that leveraged these more difficult models, and we kind of made every mistake that you could make with them. And so when we were acquired by AWS, the first observation that I made, it was really an epiphany for me. I could see that the usage data, as well as being able to bill correctly and more accurately, the usage data was a huge asset in its own right. For sales teams, for example, for the CFO and the finance teams. Take an example, like when it comes to a CFO and they need to think about their planning and their strategy for the coming year, it's very, very hard in software to get accurate forecasting, especially with these new models. But when you've got this usage data, which is an asset, like I said, you can actually leverage machine learning and data science techniques to produce accurate forecasting. And that's vital for their ongoing planning.
Give an example of that, because make an example of that so we can understand what that means. Practically speaking.
Yeah, that the usage of their platform, say for example, if it's generating lots of various different types of usage, whether those are log files, whether those are transactions in a money situation, often companies find it difficult to predict what their customers are going to use their software like next year or in the following subsequent period. But the thing is that the usage data itself at a low granular form, which you referenced, actually enables you to power models at a much better level than a human could have previously predicted in order to get more accurate forecasting. And so m3ter has in addition to our billing product, has a forecasting product which is coming out. So we essentially have a suite of products that are aimed at the CFO to take AI and data science techniques to help them with things like planning. It's
like the old adage, get close to your customer. I mean, if you have usage data, that's one of the KPIs that a CFO might look at.
Think oil.
Hey, are they using our product? Well, we have a subscription. Well, they're not using it. Well, they might churn.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a forecast, right? And that would be like a forecast example. Like, wait a minute, maybe we should change things.
Yeah, and often in usage models, customers end up charging the customers up front and drawing down against commitments. Or what's very typical in the AI world is credit models, where people prepay or purchase credits and then draw down against those depending on the type of prompts or the nature of the activity they're doing with the AI. And so what we enable with our AI is to tell sales teams in advance when these commitments are likely to be reached, or when the credits are likely to be drawn down, so that an appropriate action can be taken by the
way,
sales team.
the usage base, I mean, the pre-buying is really a category of marketplaces.
Yes.
You know, you get discounts, you do bulk buying.
Right.
That might impact earnings or financial reporting. A CFO might, hey, our growth actually this quarter was low, but we pre-purchased in Q2. That's spread out. I mean, I'm kind of brainstorming, riffing in real time, but that would be an impact to the CFO, right?
It is, and like CFOs of companies that deploy usage models themselves will have a much easier time if they themselves adopt these kind of prepayment or commitment type models, because they just make everything more predictable for the end customer, more predictable for the supplier.
Scott, talk about the relationship with m3ter. You, an investor.
Yep.
What was the motivation investing in m3ter? Obviously, the fact that they're doing a really cool thing and
love the team. Love the team. Love the idea. It was born out of the experience that John and Griff had at Amazon when they successfully sold their business, and the approach that they took to solving look, good problems that you want to solve are hard to solve. I've found I'm a product manager by background, so you want to take on the hard problems, and they had the best team to go and do that. They had the best vision for it, and then they got to go execute, right? So for me, it was really simple. Knew the team, loved the space, and mostly when I invest, I back teams. So
it was also interesting too on the market. We've been pulling this out on theCUBE and the research team is that as you look at services, managed services, companies are looking at their business as an operating system. This is another theme that came out of the CFO conversations. They're not operating systems people. I mean, they're not CS degrees. They don't but they have an operating system. It's called, they got a product, they pay for it, they build it, they move it to the customer, and they get some cash in return. Things happen. That's what business does, right? So when you look at the CFOs, they're thinking about the business model. So when someone says, hey, I could do it myself. Well, I got this. Well, there's risks. So people are leaning into looking at componentizing, breaking down these building blocks of their business model, like an operating system. They go, oh wow, I will lean on a service. I know they're experts. I don't have to build it. There's no real risk of having any IP there. It's not core competency, but it's plumbing, and it's deep. You're kind of doing the same thing there. So this is kind of a trend where it's okay.
They still look at it, especially the CFO and the groups that contribute as build versus buy. And I still think that's valid today. What's different is they're being inundated with all kinds of ideas on how to optimize one of those two strategies.
Yeah, and this brings up another point, John, that came out of our interview after I was thinking about what you're doing, is that the word technical debt's been kicked around. And that's a finance term. Debt is debt. Everyone knows what debt is. But when you're in a high velocity AI world, technical debt could be a problem. Because you got data involved, you got hallucinations, you got drift, you got security channels with prompt injections. You have all these kind of things that you can't have technical debt. And so one of the things we've seen is when you build a homegrown thing, whether it's a metering service or some sort of data layer or semantic layer or harmonization layer, is that if you do it internally and don't fund the team as a core competency, if someone leaves, then it becomes a black box.
It does.
This is a huge...
It does. I mean, would a company today consider building its own CRM system? No, because there's a lot of suppliers that are, valid and proven and very good, and they do it at a price point that's effective. And so I liken, what we do, billing and, our AI products to that. Sure, they didn't exist prior to this, but they do now. And I think people tend to underestimate the amount of effort involved. Engineers that particularly the sector we focus on is software. And so engineers in software companies prefer to build the product rather than build out the monetization infrastructure. That's what we've observed. And lastly, what I would say is that increasingly as companies are more and more successful, the billing infrastructure, it's dull, right? Falls under compliance and regulation, or will do. And I don't think companies want to have their own internally built software, fall under that level of scrutiny.
It's also a little bit more complicated now because you have, lineage issues, you want to track data on billings, a lot of things, a lot of moving parts going on, that's a little bit more complex than say the old school billing systems, which is database, front-end software, back-end servers. I mean.
Oh, you're totally correct. You're totally correct. You know, at scale, you've got a platform that needs to be great at ingesting billions of events in real time, needs to respond to changes in customer orders in real time, put those data sets together, tell various different, outputs exactly what data has been rated at, how much needs to be invoiced, how many credits are left. It's complicated.
Scott and John, you guys are both entrepreneurs. You're in the arena. Again, you're back.
Back for more.
Back for more. It's not for the faint of heart. I always tell people entrepreneurship is really hard. Doing startups is hard. You've been successful. I'd love to get your thoughts on the entrepreneurial landscape. And in particular, you mentioned product. Entrepreneurs are great at opportunity recognition.
Yep.
And they see an opportunity sometimes before others. And timing's everything. You're either crazy and be crazy for a long time until it reveals. But now we got code assistance, you got coding. So most entrepreneurs will see an opportunity, write some software, go capture the opportunity, get some beachhead, maybe take on some technical debt, work that down, and then sequence to a broader position and grow and go public, all that good stuff.
Yep.
Now with code assistance,
Yep.
entrepreneurship's kind of going internally. So opportunity recognition and code assistance. So as entrepreneurs, how do you look at that? Because the buy build, which you brought up, Scott, is a good one because that might say, hey, I got a code assistant, I'm just going to build my own CRM.
Yeah.
Well, you could do that if you staff it and if you have the domain expertise in the data, maybe.
Yeah.
Where's the hard part where the assistants and where entrepreneurs will succeed?
I honestly, it's a great question. I still think you answer it the same way I have for the 3 previous companies. The better you know the definition of the problem, what problem are you actually trying to solve? I always say, he who knows or she who knows the problem the best. The intricacies of what that problem, how hard it is, how difficult it is to overcome, how you might design a solution for it, then apply all those great things. The thing you can do, which is really true, you can move so fast.
Yeah, it's about speed.
It is unbelievable the problems that we used to solve at my second and third company that we can solve in minutes and hours. And when you condense that down, technical debt, for example, which you mentioned, starts to take on a different light. It starts to become manageable. And then actually that technical debt, you can amortize that so much faster, which is really just improving the rate of learning. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally does. And I think that's a CFO. That's why I wanted to bring it up, because technical debt usually isn't a CFO conversation. It will be because the speed will be impacted, the quality will be impacted, and also the entrepreneurial opportunity, who you're partnering with. Because I think the buy build doesn't go away, but I think it's highlighted by speed, resilience, and profit. I mean, obviously.
But we should also, just point out that when anything is changing as fast as it is now, it just creates enormous mountains of opportunity. And so for entrepreneurs that have it in their blood, they're going, oh my God, there's years ahead of greenfield, for us to continue doing what we enjoy doing, which is founding great companies.
It's interesting. I love the founder angle here, because you guys are bringing something to the market where, whether it's a CFO or a CISO or a CXO or developers, at the end of the day, you got to know the problem. I totally agree with you on that. It's totally right on. Great highlight. But it's also having a value proposition.
Yeah.
And if code assistance will be native and be part of the human in the loop, there has to be an enablement there. So you have to solve a problem that provides value. That you get paid for. And can scale.
He and I were debating before we came down here over a cup of coffee about how important the discussion of ROI is in this world. And when I say things are very tangible now, we can literally pinpoint the hard dollar cost efficiencies, gains in automation, or revenue uplift opportunity in a much more condensed time, and be able to explain that internally to the organization and have them understand it. As a startup previously, that takes a long time. And I think that time, because things can happen so fast, has also made a massive difference. So a CFO or even a CEO, they can look and see, if I do this, I get this, right? If I do this, I can get this, and then make better choices.
That's why I love the CFO AI conversation, because the why question comes up. And they have the architecture, venture architecture, advanced architecture. They know the moving parts. They know where dependencies are. They kind of know the skeleton of the organization, money flow. That's not a technical conversation. That's just saying, well, if I can merge this data with this data, and someone explained that to me, some engineer, then
Yeah.
They're leading the transformation.
The what and the why is where we try to, people love to talk about the how. And I always tell our engineers and our data science team, I know you're going to figure out the how.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
But the what and the why you do this stuff, that's where we like.
So you guys think the business model transformation is a legit conversation, right?
We already see, even for a little company like ours, just the success we've had at major corporations where the tangible results are there and they're leaning in more. And, so yeah, it's palpable.
I'd say it's never been more important. You've got a lot of large incumbent software providers that have just suddenly been blindsided by a new capability that the world didn't have a few years ago. And there's a lot of startups that are kind of just going straight to this new technology stack that are going to disrupt many of those incumbents. So to my mind, and what we see and observe is, a lot of these incumbents have got to react fast, and get AI into their products to be able to compete with the capabilities that the new products have.
The other observation I'd say is, everyone talks about developers and startups, but mainly developers, all the big vendors. We want to win the startups and win the developers. They're trying to force their tech stack on the developers when they're all going open source. You go to Hugging Face, you're like, okay, they're not going to these other companies, the incumbents, but the enterprise incumbents have go-to-market bridge to the customers. So, I think what I'm seeing is if you can get the developers to adopt a stack that's the customers, that's a better value proposition than saying, use my technology and I'll compete with Amazon. So the enterprise is now evolving to a whole nother ball game here. What do you guys think about that? What's your reaction to that statement that the better play for these big companies is to say, I'm already in the enterprise. JP Morgan Chase is not going to throw out all their servers.
Yeah, I think it's the same architecture, governance, and security. That's important to address in this particular context. But then it's like whatever has the less friction that gets you the results the fastest.
And I'm the CFO, I want ROI, right?
That's it.
I already paid for all this gear and software, CRM or whatever.
Yeah.
How do I get my data in there?
A lot of our whole reason for being is companies have made massive investments in these systems, and it's time to start balancing the quality of the data with what those systems can do.
Well, guys, really appreciate you. A couple quick questions here. CFOs that are watching, what's your observation? How should CFOs think about CFOs that you guys either sell to or prospects or people that are re-architecting? How should they be framing their job scope?
Well, I think there's two things they need to think about. It's how their company as a whole is going to respond to AI generally. And when they decide to start baking that into their product, are they ready to roll out a new monetization infrastructure? And then secondly, how can AI benefit them individually in their departments? They've got several responsibilities. In strategy and planning, service like m3ter can help them with that. It can help them with pricing optimization and modeling and forecasting and things like that. So they should leverage tools like that.
Yeah. Scott, what's your take? You talk to CFOs all the time.
Partner. Come at it as an approach where everyone's going to learn together. This is still a very new space in terms of adoption within an enterprise. And by combining and working together, I know that sounds kind of trite, but we have much more robust conversations when it's not, hey, what can you do for me tomorrow? It's like, how can we work together with the team that I have and the infrastructure that I have today with great partners
It's a systems mindset where the relationship between things matter. People, places, and things. And that's what we stand for, the wired network or the CUBE.
Awesome.
Yeah, and connecting people and having
we love being part of it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it. Thanks.
Great job. Thank you so much.
I'm John Furrier with theCUBE. This is part of theCUBE plus the NYC Wired community, really bringing the data to you out in the open. Again, we want to start the conversations of business transformation. The CFO is a key stakeholder. Obviously, the AI leaders who are making it happen are changing the game. It's impacting businesses everywhere. Thanks for watching.